anything and everything with puff pastry in it. So in today's video, I want to show you 4 ways that you can use puff pastry to make these sweet desserts. So I refuse to make my own puff pastry, which is why I'm going to just be using a store-bought one like this. Any brand works just the same, I can imagine at least. You can also make your own puff pastry if you want to do that. It'll probably end up the same. Yours probably will taste better than the store-bought one, let's be real. But let's get into it. So the puff pastry I have kind of comes in these 2 little squares. So I'm just going to start by removing them from the package. And I'm basically just going to roll each of those out into nice squares with a little bit of flour. Now this is about the size that you want, so I'm just going to lay this aside while I roll out the other one. Now because I want to show you 4 different things, I'm basically just going to cut both of these in half so I have 4 different sets of puff pastry to work with. Now the first thing I want to show you is how to make these really easy cinnamon roll type bites. So for those, you're just going to need a little bit of melted butter, a good pinch of cinnamon, and 1 to 2 teaspoons of sugar. So all we're going to do is brush on butter all over the surface and then mix together our cinnamon and our sugar and sprinkle it all over. Now I'm just going to roll it up from the short end to the short end and then place it into the fridge while I make the rest of my puff pastry desserts. Now you want to make sure you're kind of getting a tight roll. Now by putting this into the fridge, it's allowing the puff pastry to get a little bit more cold, which will ultimately just make cutting it a little bit easier and it won't kind of fall apart as easy. But you can just, if you want, cut it right now, put it onto your baking tray and pop it into the oven. For the second puff pastry snack, I want to make these Nutella sticks. So as you can probably tell, we're going to need some Nutella and our puff pastry. All we have to do is spread a thin, even layer of puff pastry all over the top of our puff pastry. Then we're just going to cut it and give it a little twist. Now instead of Nutella, you could also use some melted chocolate or really anything else that's similar. I feel like jam would also be pretty yummy. Okay, so my Nutella is a little bit too hard to spread it, so I think I'm going to microwave it for a couple of seconds just to make it easier to spread onto the puff pastry. Now I forgot to film the last part, but basically all I did was cut that Nutella puff pastry into slices, and then all I did was take each strand, twist it with my fingers, and then place it onto my baking tray. Now for the third puff pastry snack, I want to make some chocolate croissants. So for that, I'm just going to be using a handful of some chocolate chips as well as some melted butter, and I think I'll also be egg washing them. Now you can use any chocolate that you want. I feel like actual dark chocolate would be a lot better than these chocolate chips, but this is what I'm working with today, so it's just what I'm going to use. And I'm also going to be chopping this up a little, so I'm going to do that first things first. Now I want to make like 3 rectangular chocolate croissants that you can buy from the store, but if you wanted to make them the crescent shape, all you would have to do is cut your puff pastry into triangles and then roll it up from the long side to the short side. But I think I'm going to get about 3 chocolate croissants out of this small piece of puff pastry. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this into 3 pieces already. There. Now I'm going to brush maybe a tiny bit of butter onto each piece, then sprinkle some of that chocolate on and simply just roll it up. Now the chocolate croissants are also going to get an egg wash. So I just have an egg yolk with a splash of heavy cream that I've just kind of whisked together here. And then I'm also going to just stick on a couple of these almond slices. Now the last thing I want to show you is how to make Palmiers. I don't actually know how to say it, but we call them Schweineohren or pig's ears in German. So for those you're going to need again 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar, a good pinch of salt, as well as some of that melted butter. Now all we have to do is cover our puff pastry once again with melted butter and then sprinkle on that salt and sugar until it's completely covered. The sugar is going to allow it to caramelize in the oven, which will kind of crispen it up, and it's going to taste really, really good. And the salt will just kind of round it all together. as you could see in this video, we basically created this kind of heart shaped with the puff pastry due to the way that we folded it up. So I'm also going to put this into the fridge for a couple of minutes just so it'll be easier to cut it, just like we did with those cinnamon rolls. Now all of our puff pastry snacks are going to bake at 200 degrees Celsius or 400 degrees Fahrenheit for around 20-25 minutes or until they're nice and golden brown. Everything's done baking and I just transferred it onto my cooling rack to completely cool down. So you can see at the bottom that the sugar has made them nice and caramelized, which is going to add a little bit of crispiness to it. Now for the pig's ears, you could also drizzle on some chocolate. So I've just got some chocolate that I had melted down with some coconut oil, just melting here in my water bath. So all I'm going to do is just drizzle some of that over my little pig's ears, or you could alternatively also just dip them into it.